Thank you, South by Southwest. My first time here, I went out with Bill Murray. I just met him. He was in a dress riding a pony, and it's just been fun ever since.
Stay. Whoa.
It's the first time I came to South by
熱
Southwest.
気にあふれて
It's so warm
もっ
and
と早く来るべきだ
I
った
should
と
have come earlier.
思います。
Good storytelling is always going to come down to the emotional connection.
The storytelling, there's so much behind it. When you put the best people together, they can create incredible things.
We're going to lose up to 50% of all biodiversity between now and 2050, and the choice not to pursue de-extinction is a choice. And we know that the results of that choice are half of life on Earth is dead.
But seriously, though, when are we getting dinosaurs?
Thank you for having us. Whenever we are here in Austin, we love to take part in the culture.
My name is Mauricio. I'm from Brazil. A design professor. It's amazing here. The graphics, the people, the culture, the food. It's very, very cool.
Hello, South by Southwest. Hello, Nicole. So happy to be here. Southwest, my first time.
Hey, I'm Luke. I'm the head of games and screen at South by Southwest Sydney. I think one thing Australia's always been really good at is breakout indie titles. So we're always excited to see kind of the fresh crop coming out from homegrown developers. Based on what we've seen, there's a few really big ones dropping in 2025.
My girlfriend turned into a worm.
Travel assistance to Dubai.
So I took her to the premiere of her new short film at South by Southworm Film and TV Festival. I made sure she had all the right credentials and got the press attention she deserved.
You know, for me, the challenge, of course, was, you know, the months and months that I spent training to line dance. Tom Cruise has nothing on me.
Please welcome to the stage, Emma Lembke.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emma Lembke. I'm a senior at Washington University in St. Louis studying political science, but my real work is in advocating for young people in the digital world. I created my first social media at the age of 12 years old. I was in the 6th grade. I was the last in my friend group to download Instagram. And at first, these platforms, they seemed really magical, a way to connect with others, to express myself, and to explore beyond my small little world in Birmingham, Alabama. But as I spent more time online, I was met with a much harsher reality. These platforms weren't built for my well-being. They were built to capture and to hold my attention at any cost. And by the time that I reached high school, my mental health had seriously deteriorated. Social media wasn't just a distraction, it was a source of my anxiety, my self-doubt, and harmful content that shaped the way that I viewed myself. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. Here we go. As my screen time increased, my mental and physical health suffered. The constant quantification of my worth through likes, comments, and followers heightened my anxiety and deepened my depression. As a young woman, the constant exposure to unrealistic body standards and harmful recommended content led me towards disordered eating and severely damaged my sense of self. But no matter the harm incurred, addictive features like autoplay and the endless scroll pulled me back into the online world where I continued to suffer. And as I later stated in that congressional testimony about 2 years ago, I am not alone in my experience. My story represents millions of young people growing up in a digital world designed without our safety in mind. So that's why I founded the Log Off movement, a youth-led organization where young people can reclaim control over their digital lives and push for real change. But awareness isn't enough. We needed action. That's why I also co-designed and co-founded Design It For Us, a coalition of youth activists demanding policy solutions that force tech companies to design platforms with our safety at the center, not as an afterthought. But as we pushed forward, something became clear. The issue isn't just about young people. It affects us all in unknown and unimaginable ways. We aren't the first generation to be shaped by new technologies. Every transformative shift, whether it be the radio, television, or the internet itself, it came with a fight for responsible innovation. And every time, it wasn't just one group, but a coalition across generations, industries, and movements that forced change. That's why I'm here today, speaking for SMC, the Sustainable Media Center. SMC was built on a simple but powerful idea. We can't fix this alone. Tech reform isn't just a Gen Z fight, or a parental concern, or a policy debate. It's all of these things. It's a labor issue, a mental health issue, a democracy issue, a human rights issue. Every sector of society has a stake in building a better future for social media. At SMC, we're bringing these voices together, not just youth activists, but parents, educators, researchers, whistleblowers, policymakers, and even tech insiders, former tech insiders, who know exactly how these platforms were designed to exploit us. We believe that true reform requires an intergenerational and interdisciplinary movement, one that recognizes the power of young people as changemakers, while also learning from those who have fought similar battles before us. The problems we're facing, they're systemic. But history has shown us that systems can change when enough people demand it. So, how did we get here? And more importantly, what can we do about it? We've reached a point where the harms of social media can no longer be dismissed as unintended side effects. They were built into the very design of the platforms. What started as tools for connection and creativity have become machines of manipulation, preying on our psychology, shaping our behaviors, and in many cases, harming the most vulnerable communities, especially young people. At the Sustainable Media Center, we've identified 5 core problems, the big 5, that define the crisis that we're facing. Number 1, teen mental health and cyberbullying. Social media fuels comparison cultures, exacerbating anxiety, depression, self-esteem issues, especially among teens. The rise of cyberbullying and harmful algorithmic content has been linked to self-harm and worsening mental health, particularly among young girls. Second, misinformation and disinformation. False and misleading content spreads rapidly, distorting reality and undermining democracy, public health, and social trust. Algorithms favor sensationalism over accuracy, making it harder and harder to discern fact from fiction. Addiction and decreased attention span as third. Platforms are designed for addiction, and using infinite scroll, autoplay, and notification loops to keep users engaged for as long as possible. Studies show this is actually rewiring our brains, shortening our attention spans, and making deep focus increasingly difficult. 4, erosion of privacy and data exploitation. Social media companies collect and monetize massive amounts of user data, often without full consent or even awareness. This data is then used for targeted advertising, behavioral manipulation, and surveillance, putting users at risk. And lastly, political and social polarization. Social media amplifies extreme viewpoints, trapping users in what we call echo chambers and fueling division, distrust, and hostility. Coordinated disinformation campaigns further manipulate public opinion and destabilize democratic institutions. And each of these problems, they're interconnected, feeding into and reinforcing the other. Together, they have created an ecosystem of harm that affects individuals, families, communities, and even societies. First, teen mental health, its crisis, and cyberbullying. If you talk to young people today, mental health struggles are a common thread, and we don't have to speculate about the role social media plays because we have the data. Research has directly linked heavy social media use to increased rates of self-harm and suicidal ideation among teens. Social media fuels comparison cultures, where teens, especially young girls, are constantly measuring themselves up against filtered, curated, and often unrealistic portrayals of life and beauty. Algorithm-driven content can expose vulnerable users to harmful materials related to self-harm, eating disorders, and body dysmorphia, reinforcing behaviors that are dangerous instead of offering help. We know this because big tech knows this. They have the internal studies, they've seen the reports, and yet they continue to prioritize engagement over well-being because more screen time means more profit. My colleague, the Facebook whistleblower, Frances Haugen, revealed internal Facebook research proving that Instagram made body image issues worse for 1 in 3 girls. And yet, the company chose to suppress that information rather than act on it.
Well, to be real clear, we have had our primary form of social media, Facebook and Instagram, be controlled by a billionaire since 2004. Or I guess he wasn't a billionaire yet. He was a billionaire as of 2008 or something. So we've had this for a long time. Musk is not the first one. And I think the real question here is, do we want to have critical communal infrastructure be completely unaccountable to the public? That's the real question.
And alongside Frances Haugen, we have Jonathan Haidt, who I interviewed at an SMC event in New York this past summer. And he's been warning for years that rising depression, anxiety, and self-harm rates among teens, it aligns almost exactly with the rise of social media and smartphones. And then there are families who know the cost of the crisis all too well. England Roberts' parents lost their daughter after relentless online harassment pushed her to a breaking point. As parents, they were engaged in their daughter's digital life. They had the passwords. They paid attention. But behind the screen, the pain was too much. Their story is not unique, and yet big tech companies continue to deny responsibility.
She loved performing in front of people. You would see her eyes light up.
She was on social media anytime she did have her telephone. One night, as England was spending time with her friend, they were looking for funny videos on Instagram. And there was this one video of a lady mimicking self-strangulation.
With social media, we thought it was something of ways for our kids to connect, to have fun. We didn't know about the dangers of it.
Second, misinformation and disinformation. We live in an age where truth is losing grounds to virality. False information spreads faster than facts, making it difficult for users to distinguish what's real and what's manipulated. Misinformation doesn't just mislead, it affects elections, public health, and social discourse, leading to real-world consequences. Algorithms, they favor the extreme because the more sensational, polarizing, or enraging a piece of content is, the more likely it is to go viral. We saw this specifically during the pandemic, when anti-vaccine conspiracies flooded platforms. We see it in global politics, where disinformation campaigns are used to manipulate public opinion, spread propaganda, and influence elections. Big tech has built an environment where lies travel faster than the truth, because outrage and fear, it keeps people clicking. Third, addiction and decreased attention span. We've been trained, honestly engineered, really, to compulsively check our phones. I bet you at some point in this talk, one of you is going to have a notification, you're even going to check it. And the infinite scroll, autoplay, and constant notifications aren't just conveniences. They're deliberate psychological traps designed to keep us hooked. Studies show that prolonged social media use is rewiring our brains, leading to shortened attention spans, compulsive behaviors, and increased difficulty focusing on deep work or sustained thought. Addiction to social platforms is interfering also with education, productivity, and real-life relationships. Social media platforms thrive on one thing: your time. The longer that they can keep you scrolling, the more ads they can sell you. And they are making billions of dollars at the expense of our well-being and our attention.
But the absurdity, so our situation is this. A couple of giant companies basically control our children's social lives. They've invited them in, they're hosting childhood and adolescence now. The main obstacle I've faced is resignation, the sense that this is, the train's left the station, we can't undo this is the way of the future. The idea that the most powerful companies in the world host our children's childhood and have no liability, no responsibility is completely insane.
And just as a side note, if you haven't read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, I seriously consider picking it up over the next few weeks. Fourth, we're going to talk about erosion of privacy and data exploitation. Think about this. Every time you open up an app, scroll, like, or pause for just a second too long, you're giving away a piece of yourself. Social media companies collect vast amounts of information and personal data, not just what we share or what we watch, what we search, where we go, but also how long we linger on content. That data is then monetized, sold, and used for targeted advertising, shaping not just what we buy, but how we actually think, how we actually behave. Privacy breaches and data leaks have also put users at risk of identity theft, scams, and mass surveillance. Users often think, well, I have nothing to hide. But this isn't about hiding, it's about control. Right now, big tech companies hold all of the power, and we hold almost none. Next, political and social polarization. We are more connected than ever, but we also are more divided than ever. Social media algorithms favor outrage, pushing users deeper into echo chambers and confirmation bias loops. The result? A more polarized society, where productive dialogue is replaced by hostility and misinformation. Troll farms, foreign disinformation campaigns, and bad actors, they exploit these platforms to sow division, weaken trust in institutions, and destabilize democracies. And this is not just a young person's problem. This is not just about Gen Z or millennials or parents worried about their children. This is everyone's problem. What connects all the big five? They aren't separate issues. They are symptoms of a system designed for profit and not for people. The good news? Systems can be changed, but it won't change by itself. It will take collective action, it will take policy, it will take intergenerational movements. We know what the problems are. Now we need to talk about who is responsible and who has the power to fix it. If social media harms were only affecting one group of people, fixing the problem might be a lot simpler. But the reality is that no one is untouched. These platforms shape how we learn, how we communicate, how we see ourselves, and even how we govern. This is not just a crisis for young people. It's a crisis for families, for educators, businesses, society as a whole. And if we're going to fix it, we have to understand who is affected and how. At the SustainableMedia.Center, we work with stakeholders across every part of this ecosystem, because the only way to change this system is together. First, young children, growing up in an algorithmic world. A generation ago, childhood meant playgrounds, books, face-to-face interactions. Today, it means YouTube, TikTok, and algorithm-driven content that is shaping developing minds before they even understand what an algorithm is. By age 8, over 50% of children have their own tablet or smartphone. By age 12, more than 80% are on social media, despite age restrictions that are rarely enforced. Platforms target young users with addictive content, shaping their behaviors before they even understand the risks. We've heard the stories of children spiraling down algorithmic rabbit holes, exposed to violent, inappropriate, and extremist content, simply because the platform's designed to prioritize engagement over safety. YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, they all claim to have safeguards. But time and time again, investigations have shown us that they fail. A 9-year-old should not have to battle an algorithm designed by a billion-dollar company to keep them hooked. And yet, millions of children are growing up in that battle right now. Next, teens, the most harmed generation. If Gen Z is the first generation to grow up entirely in the digital age, then they are also the first to experience the full weight of its consequences. Teen mental health has plummeted in the social media era, and we know why. The constant pressure to curate a perfect image, to be liked, to be followed, and to be validated by strangers. The addictive pull of endless scrolling, which keeps them glued to their screens at the expense of their school, sleep, and relationships. The algorithm-driven exposure to harmful content, from body distortion to self-harm encouragement. Jonathan Haidt describes this as a massive, uncontrolled social experiment on the mental health of an entire generation. And unlike previous generations, teens today cannot escape their struggles by simply logging off, because social media has become the primary way they connect, they socialize, and they exist in the world. This is not their fault. They did not create these platforms. They did not design these algorithms. Yet, they are the ones paying the price. Young adults, hooked from adolescence, struggling into adulthood. By the time social media users enter young adulthood, the patterns have been set. A decade more of screen time addiction, a fractured attention span, and a deeply ingrained dependence on digital validation. Young adults today are facing record levels of anxiety and loneliness. And yet, wasn't social media supposed to make them feel more connected than ever? Former tech insiders like Tristan Harris have spoken out about how these platforms were never designed to promote well-being. They were designed to maximize profit by keeping users engaged for as long as possible. Many young adults now recognize the harms of social media, yet they feel trapped in an ecosystem that dominates their personal, their academic, and now their professional lives. They ask, how do I quit when my entire life is built around it? The answer? We need systemic change. Individual willpower is no match for an industry that has spent decades engineering addiction. Parents, fighting a losing battle. Every parent today is navigating an unprecedented challenge. How do you protect your child from a system that is designed to bypass you? Parental controls? Easy for kids to work around. Screen time limits? Hard to enforce when they're at school and their social life and their entertainment are all online. Just wait until they're older. That's not realistic when their entire peer group is already on social media. Many parents feel powerless, watching their children struggle with anxiety, bullying, and digital addiction, knowing that they can't simply take away the phone without isolating their child from their friends and their community. Parents should also not have to fight billion-dollar corporations alone. They deserve real protections, real accountability, and real support. Teachers, competing against the algorithm. Educators have always been tasked with preparing students for the future, but now they're fighting a system that is actively undermining focus, curiosity, and deep thinking. Students' attention spans are shrinking, disinformation is flooding into the classrooms, cheating has gone digital, making academic integrity harder to enforce. Teachers didn't sign up to be content moderators, attention monitors, and digital literacy experts, but today, they have no choice. If we want the next generation to think critically, engage meaningfully, and learn deeply, we have to create an online ecosystem that supports education, not erodes it. Brands and advertisers. caught between profit and ethics. Social media isn't just where people connect, it's where businesses grow. For years, brands have relied upon platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook to reach consumers. But now, they feel as though they have a moral dilemma. Despite known mental health risks, most major brands continue investing heavily in social media platforms, prioritizing profit and reach over ethical concerns. Advertising dollars fuel the algorithms that promote harmful content, creating a direct link between brand spending and mental health impacts. While brands have leveraged to demand platform accountability, few are willing to sacrifice engagement metrics by pushing for meaningful safety reforms. And some brands are starting to pull back from these toxic platforms, refusing to be associated with harm, while others are doubling down on hate-for-profit platforms. Real change will only come when advertisers demand transparency and ethical standards from platforms that are profiting off their spending. The advertising industry has immense power. The question is whether they will use it responsibly. Now, none of these groups can fix this alone. Young people are raising their voice, but they need legislation to back them up. Parents are fighting for their kids, but they need to have better protections. Teachers are trying to educate, but they need platforms to prioritize learning over addiction. Brands and advertisers hold financial power, but they need to take a stand for ethics over engagement. This isn't a fight against social media. It's a fight for a better digital future. And that future will only be built if we work together. The crisis of social media wasn't created overnight, and it won't be solved by a single action or a silver bullet. It requires something bigger, a coalition that spans age, expertise, and industry.
You know, I'm an optimist at heart. And so I actually believe in these young kids to actually try to lead us out of this world. We might need to give them a few tools in order to pull it off. And I think it's really important to start lifting up what those things look like. And we need to help them imagine what's the world we want to be in so we can actually start building it or help them build that world. So, you know, I think left to their own devices, I think we might be in a pretty bleak place. But I'm optimistic that we can help lead out of it.
At the Sustainable Media Center, we believe that real solutions must be built with the people most affected at the table. This isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about building something better. That's why our approach is based on 3 core principles. First, youth-led innovation, giving Gen Z the power to co-design safer digital spaces. Second, multi-sector collaboration, bringing together educators, policymakers, researchers, and tech leaders to drive change. And third, sustainable solutions, creating new social media models that prioritize mental health, digital literacy, and ethical design over profit-driven harm. And we're already taking action. For too long, young people have been treated as passive users, when in reality, they are the ones who understand the platforms best. That's why we're flipping the script. Through Activate Media, we're creating a co-design incubator where young people work alongside developers, policy experts, and mental health advocates to test new platform ideas that put safety and agency first, to develop alternative business models that don't rely on addiction and surveillance, and to fund and accelerate new digital spaces built for community, not manipulation. This isn't just theoretical, it is already happening. Through a Gen Z advisory board of 25 young leaders, we are including young voices in every stage of social media reform, ensuring that the next generation of platforms isn't just built for them, but with them. As one of our youth advisors puts it, we're tired of being test subjects in an experiment we never signed up for. It's time that we had a say in the systems that shape our lives. This is what real digital empowerment looks like. And we've seen this coalition model work before. In the past, industries that were once deemed too powerful to regulate, from big tobacco to the auto industry, were forced to change because of public pressure, government action, and industry innovation. Now, it's social media's turn. As Frances Haugen said in her testimony against Facebook, we can have social media that brings out the best in humanity, but right now, it's doing the opposite. The intergenerational movement for a safer digital future is already growing. The question is, will we act fast enough? Here's the issue. The current business model of big tech thrives on exploitation. But what happens when advertisers refuse to fund harm? Right now, brands pour billions of dollars into ad systems that amplify misinformation, promote harmful beauty standards, target children with predatory algorithms, and much, much more. But what if they didn't? What if we explore new business models, platforms that offered engagement without enragement? What if we embraced and even experimented with subscriptions, digital goods, even advertising that users can have control over? Maybe contributors become community moderators, investing effort in getting free membership. We're talking about ethical platforms, ones that center community, privacy, and well-being instead of this endless addictive feedback loop. That's what we think we can build, and I am here to show you how. Look at this image. These are young people that are glued to their phones, and honestly, they kind of look like me and my friends a few years ago. Right now, they are consumers of platforms that are designed to capture their attention at any cost. But what if we flipped the script? What if we became the architects of our own digital spaces? That's what we're proposing, a future where social media honors its audiences rather than exploits them. A future where young people aren't just users, but essential partners in reform. At the Sustainable Media Center, our mission isn't complicated or abstract. It's deeply personal. We want to catalyze real change to build a sustainable social media future. We believe in a new landscape, one that amplifies young people's agency over the content we create, consume, and share. One that values our well-being over profit margins. That is why we launched Activate Media. This isn't another think tank or advocacy group. We already have plenty of those. This is a platform that has embedded Gen Z members as true co-design partners, not consultants who are brought in at the end for a diversity photo op, but creators who shape these spaces from the ground up. We're building a board of Gen Z advisors ranging from 15s to early 20s. But there are people who've lived in the reality of growing up digital, who understand both the promise and the peril. They aren't token youth representatives. We young people have real power at this table. Together, we're creating a Gen Z-driven co-design incubator to explore, to test, to innovate new social media platforms that prioritize our well-being over engagement metrics, platforms that give us back control over our own digital lives. I want to be very, very clear. We're not alone in fighting this battle. There are incredible initiatives focusing on youth mental health, digital literacy, and policy change out there already. Our piece of the puzzle is Activate Media, a virtual digital lab where young innovators like me can co-create the platforms we wish had existed when we were growing up. Think of us as a Y Combinator for the next generation of social media, but unlike traditional accelerators that focus on growth, we measure success by how well these platforms perform while also protecting and empowering their users. This is because we have lived through the alternative. We refuse to let another generation grow up with the same harms. But more importantly, we refuse to create another generation of unwanted test subjects in one of the world's most harmful experiments. Our approach follows 3 key phases. First, we mobilize. We're launching an intensive research sprint that doesn't just study us, it centers our voices and experiences. A crucial early element of this phase will be convening a series of in-person focus groups with diverse Gen Z participants from across the country. We'll create safe spaces where young people can openly share what they love about social media, what they hate, what hurts them, what they wish could be different. These aren't just research sessions. They are the foundation of our entire approach. The insights, pain points, and dreams expressed in these conversations will directly fuel our co-design process, ensuring we're addressing real needs, not just assumptions about what young people want. We'll then also map the economics behind our intention, document the harms we've experienced, and identify solutions that come from us, not for us. Second, we build. We'll pair developers directly with Gen Z advisors to create new platforms. This isn't about adults designing what they think we need. This is about collaboration across generations, ensuring solutions blend innovation with safety while also measuring our actual needs. And third, we scale. We'll accelerate the most promising ideas into venture-ready platforms. Each validated solution will combine strong user adoption with measurable positive impact on young people's well-being, because those two things should and can go together. Our timeline reflects the urgency we feel. It's a coherent plan forward with an open call, if this will go, embracing a digital bill of rights written by and for young people. I'm proud to say that this builds directly off the work of my colleagues at Design It For Us, who have been pioneering the framework for what digital rights should look like from a youth perspective, and where I was a founding member. Their groundbreaking work will serve as a crucial foundation as we continue to develop principles that put our well-being first, not corporate terms of services designed to be ignored, but genuine guardrails that protect our digital futures. Then, a co-design incubator where we'll build, test, and iterate. This isn't some distant future. This is happening now, with my generation leading the way. And finally, we'll match our most promising projects with investors who understand that profit and purpose aren't enemies. They're partners in creating sustainable change. This approach transitions from philanthropy to venture, creating models that don't need to exploit us to succeed. Our goals, they are not vague promises. They're concrete commitments. We'll source 150 high potential ideas for new social media platforms. These won't come from corporate boardrooms. They'll come from the very people who've been harmed by the current system. We'll fund up to 25 MVPs, working directly with Gen Z to innovate and iterate. Not in focus groups where our opinions are noted and then ignored, but in true partnership where our insights drive development. We'll establish baseline for user mental health and track improvement, because unlike the platforms that we grew up with, we actually care if we're helping or hurting the people who use our platform. And ultimately, we'll secure funding to launch 3 to 5 transformative platforms, not by exploiting vulnerabilities, but by creating spaces that help us become our best online selves. Our partners will help build digital spaces that uplift and inspire. Together, in line with our core principles, we'll create a future where youth are nurtured, our potential unleashed, and our voices celebrated. This isn't about small tweaks to an already broken system. It's about driving fundamental change and opening a new era of possibility, one where platforms are designed to help us thrive, not just survive. Our 5 foundational principles will be codified into our public health and benefit corporate bylaws. First, youth empowerment. Our projects must give control over the media we consume and create, because we are tired of algorithms deciding who we should be. Second, data ownership and control. Our platforms must ensure we have ownership over our digital selves, because our data is our story, and our story belongs to us. Third, diversity and inclusion. Our platforms must prioritize diverse voices to combat stereotypes, because social media should reflect the full spectrum of the human experience, not just narrow ideals. Fourth, ethical measure media practices. Our platform will reduce the amplification of harmful content, because we have seen what happens when engagement is the only metric that matters. And fifth, impact measurement. We will continuously assess how our projects affect real people, because unlike current platforms, we actually want to know if we're causing harm. Social media sustainability means amplifying connections without stealing agency. We'll measure what actually matters. Alternative revenue growth, testing new models beyond the attention economy, because there are ways to build sustainable businesses without exploiting human psychology. User metrics, tracking not just time spent, but well-being improved, because engagement shouldn't come at the cost of mental health. Our test market during co-design will be small, but our vision is for all 35 million young people in the US, ages 10 to 18, to eventually have access to healthier digital spaces. Because every child deserves to grow up with digital environments designed for their well-being, not just their attention. The takeaway is simple. Big systemic problems call for bold funding partners who ask fearless questions, remain curious about what's next, and embrace the future with conviction. We have work to do, and we're ready. I'm not alone in this work, and I'm proud to stand alongside an incredible team of Gen Z advisors and experienced professionals who are committed to transforming social media. From my fellow youth activists like Zaman Qureshi, Deja Fox, and Jacqueline Corin, to whistleblowers like Frances Haugen, who risked everything to expose the truth, to researchers and innovators who are helping us build better systems. We are a coalition united by a single purpose: to create a digital world worthy for the next generation. We can't build it by ourselves, but we can build it with you. We refuse to accept that exploitation is the price of connection. We refuse to believe that addiction is necessary for innovation. And we refuse to concede our digital futures to the same companies that have betrayed our trust time and time again. We know the problems, we have the research, and now we have a plan. This isn't about nostalgia for a pre-digital age. It's about building a world where technology serves humanity, not the other way around. And that world will only exist if we build it together. So the next time someone says to you, "It's too late to change things," remember this. Young people are already reimagining the future. We're not waiting for your permission. Parents, teachers, and lawmakers are demanding accountability. They're refusing to accept the status quo. And brands and investors are being called to a higher standard. They're realizing that ethics and economics can align. The movement is here, the momentum is building, and the question isn't whether change will happen, it's whether we'll rise to meet the moment with the courage that it demands. Will you join us? Because this isn't about likes or followers or screen time. This is about the kind of digital society Gen Z wants to live in. This is about the values that we choose to prioritize. This is about reclaiming our digital humanity. And I believe with every fiber of my being that we can create something better than what we have today. Thank you so much. Move on to the Q&A portion. If you go to your app, I know that you can ask questions there, and I can ask anything. Slides go, yep. Thank you so much. And I just want to preface with, I do not know everything. I'm not an expert on all things technology, but I am very passionate about this issue and Gen Z voices, so feel free to fire away.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Great presentation. You talked about you're not alone. It seems to me like big brands like Coca-Cola, they should be in this room.
Yeah.
Are you seeing big brand activations coming beside you?
You know what, I have been in the space, it sounds like not for too long, but for about 5 years. When I started Log Off, I was going into my senior year in high school. Starting from that point on, I remember entering and thinking that no big corporation was going to really join the ranks. No one was going to become a stakeholder that actually cared. I have to say, over the past 5 years, I have seen an increasing number of big corporations begin to stand up. Even looking at like Pinterest, for say. Pinterest has done a great job engaging with building better digital futures, enabling young people to have healthier experiences on their platforms. But not all big corporations, not even tech companies, are being a Pinterest right now. A lot of tech companies are continuously engaging in these harmful practices. So what I'd say is, while when I began, there were fewer companies that were engaged, we still have a much longer way to go. Thank you. Yes.
I'm a teacher, and it's so funny because 3 years ago, 3 years ago, what you were trying to do was one of our businesses that we do monthly, which was giving kids agency and having a media company that hosted their content. They wanted to. That was our company, actually.
Yeah.
I think I'm an outlier in teaching because I'm pretty vocal and open. Like, hey guys, like you need to like wake up and like really push yourself to do well. And this class is teaching you some of those things, but it's really difficult for me to get to them. I try really hard to motivate them, to inspire them, and I'm still getting these walls. But I'm also at a low-income school,
Yeah.
so it's difficult, you know. So they have social media, which is a distraction, and then the trauma of what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you, like, how you think, what I can kind of, in what direction will help me get them to pay attention and to do the work, and let's move forward.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to thank you. I want to thank any and all teachers in this room right now. You know what? I grew up in the digital age that experienced this, and it was hard enough being a part of a guinea pig generation. I can't imagine being in another generation who has to witness that and has to teach through that. So I want to thank you to start off. I also want to say that it really is all about support. I think that specifically with Gen Z, we're a very active generation. We've gone through a lot. We've grown up in a digital environment. So that's all we know. So I think the best way to go about, trying to be there is continuously providing active support and empathy and understanding of, I understand where you're coming from. I understand that you grew up in this digital world, but here are potential ways moving forward. And not only saying and preaching that to them, involving them in the active process. So exactly what you were saying, if you're going to talk through, get off social media, or like, here are the reasons why, like, you shouldn't be on your phone during the classroom. Well, I've talked to many teachers before, and we've talked through what are kind of solutions where you can actively engage in a collaborative conversation about, like, what do you like about social media? What do you dislike? How do you think it helps you? How do you think it hurts you? And what I found with a lot of teachers is that students actually engage in those conversations because Gen Z has a lot to say. Like, if you ask most Gen Z, they're not going to just sit there and say, oh, social media is absolutely outstanding and I want it in exactly how it is forever and always. Like, people have grievances, and I think oftentimes people just need those platforms to be heard. And then from there, once you hear those voices in a collaborative manner, you can move forward to co-create kind of solutions.
Hello.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation, very impressive. I'm from Germany, and I'd like to know if I understand correctly, your initiative is focusing on the US, whether you're monitoring similar activities elsewhere in the world, and if you have kind of benchmarks of building a network for similar activities in other territories.
Yeah, great question. I can speak to the multiple hats that I wear, specifically with kind of the youth-led movement in general regarding tech advocacy. When I began my work, it was very centered in the United States. However, I have increasingly been in contact with many European countries. I increasingly been in contact with countries from around the world of young people saying, this is not an issue that has geographic bounds. This is affecting kids everywhere. So I believe that the youth digital advocacy movement is really infiltrating into many different countries. It's spreading, it's global. Specific to the SMC's kind of trajectory and future, I believe that right now it's starting in the United States, but like all big ventures like this, we want to see social media companies explode and take form in many different shapes and forms around the country. So, scale is important, and I do believe that in the future it'd be great to look at, what social media ideas are heard from kids in Germany or kids in Japan. We want to open up that door. But I think that the first step is just kind of seeing if the system works and then moving forth and iterating on successful versions.
Very impressive session today. Thank you so much. One thing that I was asking myself, do you see real-world examples out there right now of social media sites, platforms, networks that are at least better than Facebook and Instagram and the ones of the past? I know you're building new ones, I get it, but do you have like 1, 2, or 3 examples of platforms where you would say, yes, that's the direction that I like, or that's something that we maybe should look at as kind of a role model?
Great question, and I'm going to give you kind of half answer. I think it's subjective for me because I, as a Gen Z member, like, I have certain kind of apps and things that I really enjoy. I will say in general, there have been a proliferation of more apps out there that have wanted to engage ethically and that have wanted to engage in what does it look like to provide an experience to young people that centers their well-being more so than it's been in the past few years. So, I could throw out a few examples, but I honestly think that what I would say is that we're hoping that that becomes the new model and that more social media companies, specifically over the next, let's say 10 or 15 years, that are created by Gen Z, it becomes the new ethical standard to not just operate, but to operate at a specific frequency that involves youth perspectives, that involves youth well-being, and that really involves avoiding systems and models of exploitation. What I will also say is that there are a ton of apps that are working to help you and your well-being in the current system that we're in. So for instance, like ClearSpace, there's Opal, there are things like that that are out there that can help you limit your screen time, that can help you build better habits. So while people are trying to build better social medias, you also have to understand that we're in the current system that we're in, and there are alternatives and apps that can help you build better habits. There are a few examples. Like I'll say, for instance, like one current app that I appreciate the direction that they're going in, like I mentioned, is Pinterest. Pinterest has taken many steps to limit the amount of harmful content that they host on their platform. However, you have to keep in mind a Pinterest isn't an Instagram. The reason you go to a Pinterest is not the same reason you go to TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat. But I will say that they're a better example of a current big tech system or company that is working, I think, to integrate themselves into this new model that is forthcoming.
As a Gen Zer myself, first of all, I just want to say thank you, because so much of what you said resonated with me, and I know a lot of my friends have had similar experiences. A lot of people I know have had similar experiences, so I just want to say thank you, first of all. But I wanted to ask, is it overwhelming that there are so many social media apps that you kind of have to combat? I mean, like you just mentioned, there's Snapchat that has its own specific focus. I'm not going on Snapchat for the same thing I'm going on Instagram for. I'm not doing that for the same thing I'm going on TikTok for, which is why when TikTok almost shut down, the world kind of lost its mind, especially Gen Z. So is it concerning, overwhelming that there are so many that you have to take on? And is there maybe one in particular that you're going to try to start with and then move into that greater space? Because even if you take on Instagram, like I said, there is still TikTok, there is still that Snapchat, and all of those are affecting people's mental health, because I know I focus on different apps that my friends don't necessarily focus on. So I was just kind of wondering that dynamic of it.
That's a phenomenal question, and thank you. It's nice to have another Gen Zer in the room. That's a really great question. I'll start off by saying this. You know, Gen Z, like I said, is forced to really allocate their time in ways that is unprecedented, because you have constant demands from your phone to go in, to your point, a billion different directions. And I do think that it's really difficult because, like, when I started off in digital well-being, I said, you know what, like, Instagram is the hardest app. I have the most harmful content on there. I'm going to download an app and try to limit that. To your point, the app that I used was a paid subscription, and I had to pay for it to block any other app. So instantly I only had one lane cut off. And after that, I kind of realized, to your point, this is like, I think it's Hydra, whatever the mythical snake is, where if you cut off one head, it grows back. It's a gigantic issue. So that's one of the reasons why I think specifically with like SMC and future models moving forward, we're trying to prioritize just rebuilding, starting from the ground up and saying, okay, if so many different platforms are going to operate in an anti-social manner, they're going to not prioritize our well-being, how can we actually rebuild something that creates a new standard so that everything after this is going to operate in a way that we at least know will, prioritize us, will center us. But to go back to your initial question, it's horrendously overwhelming. And it was, I'll say this really quickly, to your point, when TikTok shut down, man, it was as if I go to college, I'm at WashU, it was as if the world had just ended. I was walking around seeing kids, like everyone was just talking about it. They're like, did you delete the app? Please tell me you didn't delete it. You're not gonna be able to re-download it. And it was just this mass panic. And that was the moment when I kind of realized that, well, there was mass panic, and then do you know what everyone did? They turned to Instagram. So that was kind of the moment that I realized, like, okay, a ban might have good intentions, but it's a really blunt tool and instrument for change, because all it does is it blocks one pathway and a new door opens. You don't go on TikTok, you go on Instagram. The same issues are there. They might have different purposes, but the same issues are there. So to your point, it's extremely overwhelming, especially in the digital advocacy space. And that's why I'm a huge techno-optimist, and I promote just building new systems. And I think that while people might say that that's very uncouth and that's not going to happen, you're Gen Z, you know how activated and engaged and excited our generation is. And I think if there's any group of people that can do it, it will be us.
Emma, thank you. You have a great story that you kicked off, and credibility for such a young person to share your insights today. What I find is for Gen X, and I think of this as being tobacco. I think of it being a big tobacco. So when I was growing up, there were cigarettes. They knew it was bad for you, but it took 2 decades before they realized they were culprits and were fined. It's still going. In Ontario, where I live in Canada, my wife and I, we have 2 teenage children. Last year, they banned cell phones in high school. And it was landmark, and it was fantastic. And my wife, who's got a non-for-profit and helps marginalized youth in areas that they need support, will go to the classrooms. She'll lead a classroom, and every youth is on their phone. And the teacher will actually make jokes. And the reason is that the teacher's job is to enforce it, but it's kind of not, right? There's a struggle, and it's not a perfect model. So unfortunately, this landmark legislation did not lead to change. Are you familiar with that across other states here in North America, in the U.S.?
So that's actually a really interesting point. I know one of the individuals that we showed today was Jonathan Haidt, and Jonathan Haidt is a huge proponent and believer in get the phones out of the classroom. While I agree with you, I think that it is a very important step. It's a great idea. In practice, it's extremely difficult because of what I said earlier in the speech. A teacher's job should not also have to be to teach at the same time of being a content moderator, at the same time of taking the phones out of the students' hands. It becomes an impossible dilemma. I've heard of legislation in the US specifically that has brought up the idea of getting phones out of the classroom. I know that the United States has been trying many different avenues legislatively to try to address this issue, and none have really been successful to this point. And I think that just shows that there has to be a larger coalition behind this push. I think that we need to hear more teachers stand up and say, I'm in an area of the world that has this piece of legislation and it's not working. What can we do? I think there has to be students who stand up and say, I'm a part of those classrooms. I don't want the phone in my hand, but this is why I feel the need to go to it. I think that we have to do a really good job of mass storytelling to be able to use those stories to propel forward greater change at the level of tech companies to build better products, and then also to actually enforce legislation. Because it is very upsetting when you are in an area. I went to a conference up in Canada a few months ago, and they were talking about that. They're like, it's very frustrating when you're creating something that's the first of its kind, and you don't want to admit it, but it fails. But what that means to me as a techno-optimist is, okay, that's not working. How can we improve it? Or how can we bring in more voices to figure out what is the missing piece here to move forward in a better direction?
Hello. One of the only things that's got me off my phone is my friends teasing me and making fun of me when I use it, calling me an iPad baby. I'm wondering if you think it's possible for us Gen Z folk to create a sort of social movement that holds one another accountable for our addictive screen use, and in a way kind of makes it cool to be offline. Do you think that's viable, or are we too far gone and sucked into the screens?
Like I've said, one, I've also been called an iPad baby, so I feel your pain. Like I've said many times, I'm a techno-optimist. I believe in the power of movements and social change, and I really do think that we can get to that point. Like, it's a weird example now, but I think back to my high school and when it was like the big vaping epidemic. And I think back to in the beginning when they first came, everyone in my school and around me, they were very interested in it. It was this new device. But after a few months and after a few years, I don't know about you, people were like, what are you doing? That's gross. Like if I saw a kid with a vape in their hand now, I'd be like, what are you doing? And while that's an imperfect example, I truly do believe that if Generation Z and younger generations to come stand up and take that social shift and they say, yes, being online can be cool, it can be fun, but don't be an iPad baby, actually interact with me, I think we can see real change. I made this organization called Log Off, and I kid you not, I'll be around my campus and I'll hear someone yell at me, log off. So it's like, I think like that's a small little micro example, but like if you can brand yourself and really embrace wanting to be offline and you can bring your community around you into that conversation, you can really hold each other accountable. But again, I think it's going to take more than just a few pockets or a few communities. It's going to take a much larger Gen Z push in saying, this is unacceptable, I'm going to help you and hold you accountable, and this is why. So I think it's going to take people like you and me standing up and not accepting that that's a status quo. but it will take time.
Hi, I'm actually a high school student and I want to be a part of this project, but I'm currently not based in the United States. Is there any way I can help?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many different pockets of the, responsible tech world, specifically when it engages with young people. So just a few organizations that I'll suggest and put out there and I think should be on everyone's radar. Design It For Us is a great youth-led coalition. They are specifically pushing forth on policy. I'll tout myself. The Log Off movement is also a kind of more nonpartisan group that's just pushing to make the social change that was just discussed. And then you have things like Encode, or Encode Justice as it was called, which is a great organization that specifically is youth-led and it is talking about AI. Those are 3 examples, but there are so many more out there. And if you connect with any of them, they also will make sure that you find the right pocket for you and the type of advocacy you're looking to engage in. But any of those groups would be so happy to hear any interest. We're really just looking to engage as many people and mobilize as many people to push forth change in any area of the world.
From advertisers' standpoint, they know excessive advertisement harm young generation, but it's a crucial tool for them for their business. Do you have any advice for advertisers?
My advice would just be kind of what I said in my speech. It's that ethics and economics can align. There is a future where we just have to build better systems. It's a hard answer to say, like, we're living in a world where engagement metrics are kind of the end-all be-all, but that doesn't have to be the case. There can be a future forward where advertisers can feel empowered to use their funds to push for change. It's just what I said at the end. You have to act boldly and you have to invest wisely. And I think that it's going to take bold funders and advisors and advertisers who stand up and say, I'm no longer going to accept the status quo. I'm going to be held to a higher standard. Will that happen? I really hope so. But I think that one way it can happen is continuous pushes from all the stakeholders that were mentioned to demand change. And that's the last question. Thank you all so much.